Dre all day.
Check 1, 2. You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there even when the success you've expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That's the go-getter energy that moves you, me, him, and her to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. We put all this together into one method, one mindset, one philosophy, one show, one book. Yes, there is a book by the same name, one audio experience, this masterclass right here that is called Work on Your Game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. Today's topic, frameworks. You don't know what a framework is, you will by the end of this episode. Frameworks, the master skill of organizing knowledge. That's what we're going to be talking about here today. If you have knowledge, proprietary knowledge, expert level knowledge, something that you think could help other people, something that would be valuable to other people, something that you think is tradable, something that is marketable, something that you could actually make money off of. If you believe you have knowledge that you can make money off of, you need to be listening very closely to everything I'm going to say here today, because I'm going to explain to you this master skill of taking that knowledge that you have and organizing it in such a way that other people can benefit from and value it and will be willing to pay you for it. This, understanding and mastering frameworks, is the key ability that will make you an expert. Now, I will credit, as I get into this subject, I'm going to credit both myself, because I've been using frameworks even before I even knew they were called frameworks. I've been using them for a very long time, even back to when I was making all those videos on YouTube. The reason I was able to make so many videos, basketball videos on YouTube back then, the reason I'm able to create some of these masterclasses even to this day, is because I use frameworks for creating my content. It's not that, again, I had to just come up with some random brand new idea every day. I have frameworks for any piece of knowledge that I have or any idea that I have. I fit it into the framework and it automatically creates more ideas for me. And I also created a guy by the name of Russell Brunson for pointing this out about this whole concept of frameworks. Your ability to create and share your frameworks is the master key to creating value for other people. It's not just having knowledge. It's not just knowing things and being good at stuff, because there are a lot of people who have knowledge, know things, and they're good at stuff, but they can't make money from it, and they can't even create value from it. Nobody even knows who they are, even though they're really great at what they do, is because they have not mastered the ability of translating it in such a way that other people can benefit from it. That is what a framework does for you. It's basically the translator. If you're speaking Chinese, another person speaking English, your framework is the translator that allows the person who speaks English or the person speaking Chinese or the person speaking another language to understand what it is that you're saying and understand it completely. All right, and nothing gets lost in translation. Whether it is all, and your framework can be things that you made up yourself or things that you've experienced yourself, or it can be things that you've gathered from other people, or a combination of both. If you listen to how I introduce this show every day, I'm giving you my framework of what the show is about. Discipline, show up every day. Confidence, put yourself out there. Mental toughness, continue showing up even when things aren't working. Personal initiative, get started and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. I'm giving you the framework of what the show is about. Within 30 seconds of you turning on any episode of this show, you know whether this is for you or if it's not. I'm giving you the framework right up front so you know, all right, do I want to listen to this or do I not? Am I interested in these elements or am I not? Because if you're not, you're not going to keep listening. But if you are, you're going to give it a chance and see what it's about. But I'm giving you the framework up front. And let me tell you that, I'm not the originator of this. I didn't create this whole concept of frameworks. I wasn't even using that word, that term, for that long, but there are people who have been doing this forever. And there are people, when you watch a television show, for example, I don't know if anybody even watches TV shows anymore, but when they had the theme music that would come on TV shows, they would show you what the show was kind of about. They would give you a rough idea of what the show was about. They show you who the actors or actresses are. They would show you kind of some scenes so you could get a little idea of what's going to be going on here. You could tell by the tone of the music, and maybe if there was some words, if there was some dialogue, they would give you an explanation. This is what the show is about. This is what we're doing. This is the framework for what you're about to get. Are you interested in this? Yes, keep watching. If no, change the channel. Everyone gives you their framework up front. When you watch a movie trailer, they're giving you the framework for the movie. We're going to give you a rough idea of what this movie's about. We're not going to tell you the whole plot line and what the ending is going to be. We're going to give you a rough idea of what you're going to get here. Is it going to be funny? Is this like a romantic comedy? Is it like a love story? Is it supposed to be scary? Is it like completely a humorous thing? Is it a comedy show? Is it an action thriller? They give you the framework for what the movie is about in a 2-minute trailer so you can decide whether you want to come see that movie or not, because everything ain't for everybody. But everyone who is good at what they do, good at sharing whatever it is they're sharing, they will let you know what the framework is in such a way that you understand whether it's for you or not before you have to dive all the way into whatever it is that's going on. Why? Because that's what experts do. Experts do not waste time with an audience of people who are not interested in what they have or don't know if they're interested because the expert failed to share what the framework was. If you're failing to share what your framework is, you're not an expert. Now, I will step on my points if I give you any more of an intro here. I probably already did. So let's just get into the material. Today's topic, once again, frameworks, the master skill of organizing your knowledge. Point number one, a framework is simply you taking what you know, organizing it into a followable and understandable system. That's all a framework is. Let me say it one more time. I want you to pay attention to every word that I use here. Pay attention to the way I'm languaging this definition. A framework is you taking what you know, and there's a key word. This is all capital letters. You can't see the writing, but it is. Organizing it into a followable and understandable system. So 3 key words in that sentence. Organizing, followable, and understandable. So if you don't organize what you know, then it can't help me. If I can't follow what you know, then it can't help me. And if I don't understand your system, then it can't help me. I need all 3. Organized, I got to be able to follow it, and I have to be able to understand what's going on. Knowing a lot of stuff that is unorganized, stuff that cannot help others make sense of it, or you can't help others make sense of it, is essentially outside of yourself useless information. I mean, it's useful for you, but it's not useful for anybody else because you're the only one who understands it. It's kind of like if any of you has ever read somebody's handwriting. I don't do too much writing by hand these days. I don't remember the last time I wrote something by hand, which is probably why I don't write things by hand. But if you ever read something that someone wrote by hand and their handwriting is not too great, and you're trying to understand what the hell it says and you can't really read it, it looks like chicken scratch. What is that? Now, maybe the person who wrote it can read it. Sometimes I write things, even when I was in school and we used to have to write by hand, I would write things and not be able to read my own writing. If you can't understand what is written down or what that information is, then how is it going to help you? How is it going to help anybody? If you can't understand your own stuff, how is it going to help anybody? It's impossible. It can't even help you. Knowing a lot of stuff that you cannot organize and help others make sense of is useless. If any of you ever read one of those For Dummies books, those yellow and black covered books, For Dummies, and they basically covered every subject. There's podcasting for dummies, there's iPads for dummies, laptops for dummies, microphones for dummies, water for dummies, books for dummies, phones for dummies, lighting for dummies, Miami for dummies, cameras for dummies, couches for dummies. All I'm doing is looking around the room just naming stuff. Tables for dummies, chairs for dummies, towels for dummies, taking a shower for dummies. Y'all heard of these For Dummies books, right? How do you think they can make so many of those books? How are they able to make a For Dummies book for damn near any subject you could think of? How is that possible? Are these guys just such geniuses? They're like, all right, let's do refrigerators for dummies. All right, let's do writing a book for dummies. Do you think they just sit around, just think of an idea, and then they just spit out a 400-page book that gives you all the information with all the research that they do? Any of you ever read one of those books? I got one or two of those For Dummies books. There's a lot of research that goes into those books. It's not just one person just sitting down, taking everything in their head and writing it down. It's not the way that book is written. All right, the For Dummies books are not written in any way like my book, Work on Your Game, for example. All of my books are things that I took what I knew, wrote them down, organized it, and gave it to you. The For Dummies books, they go and do research from what other people know and put those together, organize it for you. All right, that's what I was explaining in the introduction. A framework doesn't have to be all your knowledge. It can be knowledge that you got from other people, but you organize it in a way that nobody else did, which makes it valuable, right? But how do the For Dummies people make so many of those damn books? That's the question that I need answered. Do you know? The reason they're able to make so many of those books is because they have a framework for how they write those books. If you were to go and get, let's say, 3 or 4 of those For Dummies books, doesn't even matter which ones, and you read through them, if you read through each one, and you read through all 4 at the same time, just turn the page one at a time of each of the books, you'll notice that the way that those books are set up is the exact same way every single time. Not the same content, it may not be the same number of pages, but the setup, the overall strategy of how the book is put together is the same every single time. You ever been to a McDonald's? Why is McDonald's the most successful restaurant franchise in the world? They say Subway has more locations than McDonald's these days, I heard. Why is Subway so successful? Why? Is it because Subway has the best sandwiches and the best ingredients and the best materials, and they had the best service and they had the cleanest restaurants? Or you could sub out Subway and put McDonald's in there and ask the same question. Is that why? No. I've been to better restaurants than McDonald's. I've had better sandwiches than what they serve at Subway. I've had better French fries and better potatoes than whatever they call those things they got at McDonald's. They ain't even real potatoes, right? I've had better burgers than what they serve in McDonald's. So why are McDonald's and Subway so successful? Because they have created a framework for how you work there, which makes it so simple and so foolproof and so easy that anyone can work there. And that's why they're able to open so many locations, because you don't need specialized knowledge to work there. That's why they can have so many of them. All right, how many locations of Subway or McDonald's are there in the world? All right, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, we'll say. How are they able to do that? All right, do they find tens of thousands of great workers for each one of those locations? No. You ain't got to be great. Or you ain't got to be smart to work at McDonald's. All you got to do is follow the framework. And the framework is so simple that even a dummy can do it. All right, so you can have McDonald's for dummies. There may be a McDonald's for dummies book. You know why? You could be a dummy and work at McDonald's, and the McDonald's will still make money. And the Subway as well. Why? Because the frameworks that are in place, they are so airtight that nobody can mess them up. The For Dummies franchise is owned by this company called John Wiley & Sons. They're the publishers of the For Dummies books. All right, so in the book world, publisher basically means owner. All right, it's the same thing. The publisher, that's the one that all the money goes to them, basically. The publishers of the For Dummies books, they have a proprietary framework of how those books are written. That's why they look exactly the same. That's why they're set up the exact same way no matter what the subject matter is. Even though it is a different author, they hire different authors to write each book. It's usually more than one author. It's different subject matter. And again, completely different topics, but they all look, sound, and they are set up the exact same way because the framework is like that. McDonald's, again, the person working at McDonald's in Tennessee is not the same person working at the McDonald's in Alaska, but the framework is exactly the same. That's why the burger sounds the same. The prices are pretty much the same. The menu is exactly the same. The framework does not change. That's why McDonald's can crank out 1 million Big Macs a day. That's why the For Dummies franchise can crank out a new book every week. Anything that you see a person doing, and they're doing it over and over and over again, and they're doing it in mass quantities, there is a framework for how they're doing it. Even if that person or entity does not even know they have a framework, they have a framework. When I started making basketball videos that come out every single day on YouTube over 10 years ago, this is around, again, 2008, 2009, I talked about this yesterday, I figured out a framework. I figured out any move that I came up with, I had a series of moves that I would plug that new move into. It was about 30 or 40 moves that I had as a framework. So if I came up with a new move, I would put the new one into this 30 or 40 system framework, and that's 40 videos right there. But then in basketball, if you do something going to your right, you got to do it going to your left. So you got the right hand and the left hand. So in other words, I'm telling you my whole framework right here. Every time I came up with a new dribbling move or footwork technique, I was guaranteed to make 80 videos out of it because I had a 40 move framework, and I had to go to my right hand and I had to go to my left hand for each one. That's 80 right there. So you can figure out how it's relatively easy, so to speak, in theory, to create thousands of videos because I had a framework in place already. It wasn't me coming up with some brand new idea every day. That would not have been sustainable. I'm not that smart. I think I'm pretty smart, but I'm not that smart. But the framework was in place. The For Dummies franchise, they're going to be creating books forever. All right, they will always be creating books. When the people who are doing it right now, when all of them are dead, For Dummies will still be creating books because the framework ain't going away. All right, the people who made McDonald's what they are, they're all dead now. But McDonald's is still doing what McDonald's does, and they will continue to do what they do. Why? Because the framework is not going away. Every single day when you hear this show, do you notice the framework of how I put the show together? Every day I introduce you and tell you what the show is about, so you know it's for you or if it's not. I tell you what I'm going to talk about. I give you an introduction, maybe some story or example of why I'm talking about it, and then I'm going to give you the points to back up my argument of why I'm making the point that I'm making. Even if you disagree with the point, you will completely understand why I'm making it and understand where I'm coming from. Even if you disagree when it's over, you'll still understand it. That's what a framework does. You will always understand when there's a framework in place. Even if you disagree, you will understand. There's a difference between the two. It's not the same thing. Point number 2. Today's topic is frameworks. The master skill of organizing your knowledge in such a way that other people can follow it and understand it. Number 2, When you have a framework for your knowledge, you can use it over and over and over and over again. And even if and when you go off script, you can always come back to the framework. I'll give you an example. When I give a live presentation, I don't know if anyone listens has ever heard me speak at a live event. When I do, though, I do not memorize what I'm going to say. I just know my framework. I usually give a presentation called Work on Your Game, using the pro athlete mindset to dominate your game in business, sports, and life. Notice the pattern here. But when I do give a live talk, no matter what the subject is, I know what my framework is. My framework is going to be, I'm going to talk about discipline. I'm going to talk about confidence. I'm going to talk about mental toughness. I'm going to talk about personal initiative. Now, if you listen to this show, if you've been listening to this show for some time, you probably noticed that I have a lot of stories and a lot of examples, some of them personal, maybe half of them personal and half of them of other people under each one of those categories: discipline, confidence, mental toughness, personal initiative. Each one of those, that's the framework, that's the overall framework, right? Those four. But each one of those frameworks has a framework within it. Under the headline of discipline, I have frameworks underneath that. You heard me talk about the third day and the fourth day and the first day. Underneath confidence, you heard me talk about how to be so confident that they call you cocky. There's a framework for that. The super you, there's a framework for that. Mental toughness, there are frameworks for these things. Personal initiative, there's a framework for being a person who goes and makes things happen and waiting for things to happen. I have a framework underneath each framework, and they're all part of a larger framework. And the thing is, when I'm giving a live presentation, I know what the main thing is. I share that. All right, we're going to talk about this topic here. Let's say we're going to talk about discipline. Then I can tell you a story. I can give you the point of the story. I can tell you how to apply the story. I can give you another one, depending on how much time I got. I might have a 30-minute talk. I might have a 2-hour talk. But either way, this framework will fit. I can give you this whole framework in 30 seconds, like I do every day when this show comes on. I give you the framework in 5 minutes. Like I say, I'm on somebody's podcast. I can give you the framework in 15 minutes. Let's say me and you are having a one-on-one conversation. I can give you the framework in 20 minutes if I'm doing a TED Talk, for example. I can also give you this framework in an hour or two if I'm doing a live workshop at somebody's conference, which I have done. But the whole point of the framework, I'm not telling you that to impress you, but to impress upon you. I'm not the only person who does this. There are many people who do it. They've been doing it way longer than me and maybe even be better than me at it. But the whole point is the framework is all you need to know. You don't need to memorize everything you're going to say. You don't need to memorize your stories. You don't need to memorize your points or even the applications. All you got to know is the framework, and all the rest of it is going to come to you if you have enough experience. When I do this show right here, I told you this before. I have the subject matter, what the subject is going to be. And then I write down the points. All right, point number 1 is this. Point number 2 is this. Point number 3 is this. Everything else in between is me just telling you what's coming to mind for me as I'm talking. And the reason I'm able to do that is because I have so much experience doing it. And this is what makes me an expert. I can fill in the blanks with different stories, different anecdotes, different experiences. It could be something I just thought of in a moment. It could be something that happened years ago. It could be something that just happened yesterday. But it all fills in through the framework. The framework is the savior of the whole situation. The framework is the structure. It's kind of like, if any of you ever seen, and this is a prime example right here. I'm just thinking of this right here. Any of you ever seen a building getting reconstructed? Not deconstructed, but reconstructed. So instead of tearing down the whole building, what they do is they gut the building out. You ever see a building get gutted out? So they leave the frame of the building up. Like the outside edifice of the building is still there. They don't tear the whole thing down, but they gut everything out and then they rebuild it around the frame without tearing the whole frame down. That's the exact same thing that a framework is. So that's kind of like if I go talk about work on your game and I tell certain stories. Let's say I can tell the whole work on your game framework by telling only stories about me. I got plenty of them. But I can also gut that whole framework out and tell work on your game without telling any stories about me. But the frame doesn't change. I'm still going to talk about discipline and confidence and mental toughness and personal initiative. And I got different frameworks within those. I can talk about mental cardio. I can talk about interpersonal relationships, bad mental errors that good people make, finding mentors, connecting with other people, being a go-getter, selling yourself. And if you didn't read between the lines of everything I just told you, those are chapters of my book, Work on Your Game. You want to see a framework, go look at my book, Work on Your Game. Look at the table of contents. That is a framework for the Work on Your Game philosophy. Listen to this show, the first 30 seconds every single day. I'm giving you the framework for Work on Your Game. It's just different formats. In written format, I stretch it out a little bit. In audio format, I keep between 20, 30 minutes, usually every single day. Those are just frameworks. And everybody can do this, and there are plenty of people who do it. And if you start listen to anyone who has done their thing or has been doing their thing for a long time, over and over and over again, and you've come to like their structure so much to the point that you almost know it. You almost can memorize what they say before they even say it. You know it already off the top of your head. That's because they're using a framework. And they can plug anything or anyone into that framework and it's still going to come out pretty much the same every single time. The material within may change, but the framework does not change. One of my favorite novelty foods to go to, and again, if you follow me on social media, maybe even here, you heard me talk about this place called Rita's Water Ice. It's based actually right outside of Philadelphia, my hometown, but they have locations now in South Florida, down in Miami Beach, even in Hialeah. The thing about Rita's Water Ice that I like is that I knew before I even patronized the Rita's in Miami Beach that it was going to taste exactly the same as the Rita's that I had worked at over 20 years ago when I was a teenager in Philadelphia. I knew it would taste exactly the same. Now, how did I know that? Because I know Rita's is a franchise, and every business franchise understands the reason why franchises work is because the main company makes a framework. This is how you create the products. This is how you serve the customers. This is the way things are set up. You can make small tweaks and changes within that based on who you are and where you're at, but the framework does not change. I know if I get some mango water ice at a Rita's in Philly, it's going to taste the same as some mango water ice at a Rita's in Miami Beach. Guaranteed. Why? Because the framework has not changed. And it's the same thing for you and your expertise. And your expertise could be making hamburgers, selling water ice, or disseminating information through a podcast such as this, such as being a professional speaker, writing books, whatever it is, making a For Dummies series, whatever it's going to be. All I have to know is my framework, and I can fill in the rest as I go. Point number 3. Today's topic is frameworks. Frameworks are the master skill of organizing your knowledge. When you master frameworks, you master your knowledge. Understand, this is point number 3. Frameworks make you an expert because you can brand your framework and people will come to associate you with that framework and you are helping people get results. Just because you brand your framework doesn't make you an expert. It's because you're helping people get results. Experts produce results. Work on your game is a framework. When you hear work on your game, you're going to think of me because I branded that framework. I put a title to it and I tell you what results you're going to get from it. Now, when you hear that, now you're going to think of me. And your framework can be set up in the form of a book, a podcast, a speech, a series of Instagram videos, something that you physically do with other people, something that you represent as an individual. It doesn't have to be online. It can be offline. It can be a combination of both. It could be one or the other. And that's what a framework is. When you brand your framework, you can make yourself, you can connect your name to that framework. So anytime somebody brings it up, they got to think of you. If people are getting results from your framework and they come to associate those results with you, you now have an asset. And an asset is something that puts money in your pocket. The more assets you have, the more money you're going to make. And assets you can give to your kids when you're no longer here. The asset will continue to put money in your pocket or the pocket of the people of your heirs, even when you're no longer around, simply because you associated yourself with whatever that framework is, and people associate that framework with you. For example, 10X is a framework. This guy named Grant Cardone, he's not the only person who ever said 10X, but he branded it in such a way that if you look up 10X, you're probably going to come across his name pretty quickly. He branded that framework. The 4-hour series is a framework that Tim Ferriss owns that framework. I don't know if he has trademarks on it, but he owns it, and he owns it in spirit. That anybody brings up 4 hours something, they're going to think of Tim Ferriss because he's the one who wrote all these 4-hour books. He has branded that framework. And there are other people, many of other people, I'm not going to name them all, who have created and branded certain frameworks that they own because people associated with them. When you think of the I series, iMac, iPhone, iMessage, iCloud, what company is that? Who do we associate with it? I don't even have to fill in the blanks. You already know who that is because they have branded that framework and it produces a result for people, some result that people want, and they own it now. Whether they own it on paper or they just own it in spirit, either way, it's pretty much the same thing because nobody else can use it without somebody saying, hey, doesn't that belong to this person or that person? And if people are asking that about your framework and they're not saying your name, you need to find a different framework or find a different name for your framework because that one ain't working. Let's recap today's topic, which is frameworks. The master skill of organizing your knowledge. This is the key ability that makes you an expert. I'll credit myself. There's a guy named Russell Brunson who talks about this a lot when it comes to frameworks, taking your knowledge and organizing it in such a way that other people can not only learn from it, but they also understand it and they can get value from it. And you listen to how I introduce the show every day. I'm giving you the framework. So let's get into the points before I step on my points. As I said earlier, point number 1, framework is you taking what you know, organizing it into a followable and understandable system. Knowing a lot of stuff that you cannot organize and or help other people make sense of is essentially useless to anyone other than yourself. If you ever read one of the 4 Dummies books and wonder how they can make so many of them or how McDonald's can make so many burgers, it's the framework of how they do it. And because the framework is in place, it doesn't matter who is doing it or where they're doing it or what the subject is. The way that the how they get it done does not change. And that's why they can spit out so many of them, even though the topic changes, even though the authors change. The publisher of those books, they have a framework for how those books are written. And anyone who's going to work for them and write a book has to follow that framework or that book is not coming out. That's why they can crank out so many of them. Anything you see a person doing over and over and over again in mass quantities, I guarantee you they are working off of a framework. They are not just some genius who just produces ideas at a rapid rate. That's not the way it works. No human being is that smart. We just create frameworks that allow us to look like we are smart. Point number 2, when you have a framework for your knowledge, you can use that framework over and over and over again. Even if and when you go off script, you can always come back to that framework. So when I give a live presentation, I don't memorize what I'm going to say. I just know the framework. All right, you know the framework to work on your game. Look at the table of contents of my book. I'm giving you the framework of what work on your game is about. I can lengthen that or shorten it depending on how much time I have, depending on who I'm talking to, depending on what I want to share. I can leave some parts out or add some parts in, but the framework does not change. When you have a framework, you can riff in between because you know the strategy that you're there to execute. The framework is your strategy. What goes within the framework, the stories you tell or the examples you give, those are the tactics that go underneath the strategy. It's kind of like a building that gets gutted out, but they leave the frame up, they leave the facade up, and then they just rebuild it from the inside out. That's the same thing that your framework is. Your framework is the outside structure of the building. As long as that's still standing and in good shape, you can always gut the building out and rebuild it again from the inside out. That is your framework. And point number 3, frameworks will make you an expert because you can brand a framework and people will come to associate the framework with you and you with it. And because you're helping people get results. And if you have a framework that doesn't help people get results, then nobody will care about it, okay? This can be a book, a podcast, a speech, a series of videos, something you do in a live event, just the way that you present yourself, the way that you dress, the clothes that you wear. All these can be frameworks that can be associated with your name. If people are getting results from it and they come to associate those results with you, you now have an asset which you can trade on. Work on your game is a framework. 10X is a framework. The 4-hour series is a framework. There are plenty of others. I'm not going to name them all. You may have your own. If you don't have any and you consider yourself an expert, you need to go get one. Work on your game. Dre, all